July 12th, 2026, and I got some pretty insane updates, starting with Jorge Salinas. What's going on with that signing? Also, two center backs that Barcelona are considering, and finally, the two alternatives to Ferran Torres. We have a lot to discuss, so let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. My name is Boo, and we officially have our fourth and final semifinalist, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, Argentina defeated Switzerland 3-1 in extra halves with goals of. I'm trying to remember who scored the goals. Julian Alvarez. What a goal did Julian Alvarez score? But who scored before him? I think, McAllister. And finally, the third goal was Lautaro Martinez. Pretty weird match. I think Argentina were kind of try to reserve their energy for the next phase. They scored a goal in the first 10 minutes. And then after that, they took their foot off the accelerator. They were just chilling. And then, of course, that allowed Switzerland to score that goal. And then after that, they were forced to exert themselves anyway, go into extra halves. So I don't think their plan worked, but nonetheless, they got the victory 3-1. And now Argentina will be playing against England in the semifinal. We have two incredible semifinals. The first time in the history of the World Cup that the top four rated teams have made it to the semifinals. Of course, we have France versus Spain and then England versus Argentina. Lots of history there. You know, of course, we have the whole Falkland Islands War between Argentina and England. We also have, you know, the hand of God when Maradona scored with his hand against Argentina against England in the World Cup. So lots of history there, and it's gonna be very, very interesting semifinals. By the way, I gotta say this about Argentina. I'm still not convinced about them. I feel like in the attack, they seem to lack a lot of clarity. They seem to lack a lot of ideas. Their midfield is very static. Their defense is very lazy, for lack of a better word. I don't see anyone making runs. I don't see any plays, pre-drawn plays. I don't see any. I don't know. This Argentina is not convincing me at all. Of course, they do have a lot of things going in their favor, like experience, like the fact that they have the best player in the history, Lionel Messi, the fact that they have other great stars like Julian or Lautaro Martinez or McAllister or Enzo Fernandez. And then, of course, they have that fight, right? That desire to always win, to not give up. I think all those things do play in their favor. But as far as football, like pure football, I just don't see it. But anyway, I hope I'm wrong. Because I would love to see Leo Messi lift another World Cup, especially since this will be his last World Cup with Argentina. But anyways, enough about the World Cup. Let's discuss Barcelona, because as you know by now, I mentioned in a previous video, Barcelona will be playing the Joan Gamper Trophy match against Al Ahly, which is the Egyptian club where Hamza Abdel Karim got his start, where he came up through their academy. Of course, Al Ahly is the biggest club in Africa. So it's going to be an interesting match. Also, it's going to be a gateway into, well, not a gateway because Barcelona already has presence in Africa. They're looking to strengthen their presence in the African continent to try to, you know, identify, scout, and sign young up-and-coming talent. Of course, we've seen a lot of young African signings in the last season or two. So this will be just another way for Barcelona to increase their presence in the African continent by strengthening their relationship with Al Ahly. And well, that's not the news because you already knew about this. But the news is that it seems like right before Barcelona agreed on playing against Al Ahly in the Joan Gamper Trophy match, it looks like they had an offer from the Premier League club Fulham, and something that Barcelona were seriously considering because of course, they prefer, you know, an opponent from the Premier League. That's going to be a more interesting match. But it all fell through when Fulham decided to hire Arbeloa, the former Real Penalties coach. And once they hired him, Barcelona said absolutely not, because that guy is persona non grata at the Camp Nou, especially at the Joan Gamper Trophy match, because, you know, Joan Gamper Trophy match is supposed to be a celebration, kind of like a party. You know, the last friendly match right before the season begins, where the Barcelona presents its entire squad, its celebration. There's music, there's fireworks. You know, it's supposed to be a happy occasion, and to bring back someone like Arbeloa, who spent, his short time at Real penalties consistently, defaming Barcelona, talking about Barcelona bribe referees and Barcelona this and Barcelona that. Of course, Barcelona said, no, thank you, but you are not welcome here. Anyways, on to the next bit of news because we do have an update in regards to Jorge Salinas, the 19-year-old left back who can also play as a center back, someone that was key in Racing de Santander's promotion from second to first division, someone who's considered one of the most promising defenders currently in Spain, and someone that Barcelona had to reach an agreement with the player for his signing. But once they tried to reach an agreement with Racing de Santander, the whole thing fell apart. And well, we haven't heard anything, but don't worry because we now have an update in regards to Jorge Salinas's signing. Now, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, Barcelona did reach an agreement, so Jorge Salinas can join Barcelona as a first-team player, not as a Barca Athletic signing. He had a release clause worth 8 million euros, which Barcelona were willing to activate and pay. However, that release clause would go up to 16 million euros if Racing de Santander would get promoted to first division, which they did. Now, when Barcelona reached an agreement with the player to join the club, it was before July 1st, which is when Racing de Santander officially became a first division club. So, since that happened before July 1st, Barcelona went to pay the 8 million euro release clause, but Atletico de Madrid got in the way, and they told Racing de Santander, no, you are already a first division club, so the release clause should be 16 million euros, which we are willing to pay. So Racing de Santander then went to Barca and said, hey, it's no longer 8 million, it's 16. We're in first division, so per the contract, you have to pay us 16. Barcelona said, no, you're not in first division yet. You're officially in first division on July 1st. It's not July 1st. So that kind of like where the whole thing fell apart, with Barcelona insisting that the release clause was still 8 million because even though Racing de Santander had, mathematically speaking, gotten promoted, the new season hadn't begun yet. So that started on July 1st. So that's when the release clause was supposed to become 16, and we're Atletico Madrid making an offer for 16 million euros. Now, of course, now it's past July 1st, so now the release clause is worth 60 million euros. But what Racing de Santander have decided to do is leave the matter to the player himself. Now, Jorge Salinas was playing with Spain's under-19 team in the under-19 European Championship, which, by the way, Spain just won. They beat Germany 2-0 yesterday. So Spain is the under-19 European champion. So Jorge Salinas just became champion with Spain. So did Xavi Espart, by the way, who had an incredible tournament. But now that Jorge Salinas is done with that championship, his focus is no longer in that championship. Racing de Santander will leave the matter in his hands. They'll say, look, Barcelona are offering 8 million, Atletico 16. This is the two offers. Which one do you want to choose? We'll see which one the player chooses. Hopefully will be to come to Barcelona. Now, speaking of defenders, we got to talk about the two defenders that Barcelona currently considering. I'm going to tell you the names first, and then we'll talk about more details about what that means for Barcelona's transfer market. Now, one of the two defenders that Barcelona considering, or that is on agenda, is, of course, someone we've talked about before, Cuti Romero, the Argentine center back, the World Cup winner, who currently plays for Tottenham Hotspur, at 28 years old, someone with lots of experience, lots of leadership, someone that can organize the defensive backline. As I told you in previous videos, Deco likes this option because he believes that bringing in Cuti Romero to Barcelona will be kind of like an injection of experience into Barcelona's backline, something that we are lacking because, of course, Pau Cubarsí is still pretty young, and as far as Gerard Martin, even though he's 22 years old, he's still last season was his first season as a center back in a first division. So Deco sees Cuti Romero kind of like Íñigo Martínez, right? When Íñigo Martínez came and helped inject that level of experience and leadership into Barcelona's backline, which helped Hansi Flick a lot. So this is kind of like why Deco likes El Cuti Romero. Now, what's the problem with signing Cuti Romero is, of course, the price. It's reported that Tottenham Hotspur will want 60 million euros for the Argentine defender, something that Barcelona are not willing to pay, even though there are reports, by the way, in the English media stating that Cuti Romero might have a release clause worth 43 million euros, but only for certain clubs, and maybe Barcelona is amongst those clubs, which of course 43 million would be much better than 60, but nonetheless, it's still a lot of money. Now, the second defender that Barcelona are considering is no other than Castelo Luqueba. Some of you have mentioned him in the comments before. 23 years old, currently at Leipzig. He is a left-footed center back, so it would be a perfect pairing to Pau Cubarsí. He has a contract with Leipzig until 2029, and someone that would fit better than Cuti Romero. Cuti Romero, of course, is more of an established, experienced defender that would bring experience and leadership, where Castelo Luqueba, not as much experience, not as much leadership skills as Cuti Romero, but would be more of a profile that would fit in Barcelona, because not only is he a left-footed center back, but someone who's also incredibly fast tracking back. That's very important in Hansi Flick's scheme, since Flick likes to do the offside trap and play with a very advanced back line. So that would serve really well. And of course, someone that's good with the ball at his feet, also very important under Hansi Flick's scheme. Now, how much would Leipzig want? They're saying around maybe 50 to 60 million euros, which is still a lot of money, but unlike Cuti Romero, of course, Luqueba is younger, so you're talking about a longer, a player that can be at your club for much longer. Now, what does these two names mean for Barcelona? Well, let me clarify something. These are kind of like the two top center backs that Barcelona are considering. However, it's still not a priority. The center back position is still not a priority. This is something very important to understand. Why is the center back position not a priority? Because Hansi Flick is happy with Pau Cubarsí and Gerard Martin as his two starters. And as far as backups, we have Ronald Araujo, of course, who renewed recently. We have Christensen, who just renewed a few weeks ago. We have Eric Garcia, that can also play as a center back. And we even have Jules Koundé, who can play as a center back. So technically, there are 6 center backs on the first team. Not to mention, of course, Álvaro Cortés from Barca Athletic, who did pretty well in his debut. So technically speaking, we have 7 center backs that for 2 positions, right? So it's not a priority. This is more as future planning, especially with Luqueba, right? This is someone that Barcelona have actually met with twice already, because Barcelona really like Luqueba, and they consider this more as planning for the future as opposed to signing him right now. So that's very important to understand. Now, on to the next bit of news, because we do have to talk about, of course, Ferran Torres. As I mentioned during yesterday's video, Ferran Torres has reached a verbal agreement with PSG, where he's going to sit down with them after the World Cup, try to finalize an agreement to join the Parisian club. Barcelona, of course, tried to renew Ferran's contract, which expires next summer, 2027. Ferran asked for more money, because he considered that now that Lewandowski is gone, he's going to have a more important role. Barcelona were not willing to give him that increase, and they kind of froze the renewal. And that's when Luis Enrique picked up the phone, called up Ferran Torres, and it looks like Ferran Torres is in favor of making a move to Paris, which of course means who will Barcelona replace Ferran Torres with? Because if Ferran Torres leaves, now we have 0 center forwards, and in Barcelona successful in bringing Julian, we still have a problem, right? We only have 1 center forward. We still need a second one. So who will be the second center forward, or the backup to Julian Alvarez, since it was supposed to be Ferran, and it looks like Ferran will be leaving? Well, the first name is someone I already talked about previously. It's no other than, of course, Dusan Vlahovic, who's currently a free agent. His contract has expired with Juventus, so he has no club. He has offered himself to Barcelona multiple times. Barcelona have met with him, have told him that yes, they are interested, but he's not a priority. And Barcelona, of course, considering Vlahovic only as an alternative to Ferran Torres, not as a starting center forward. And Vlahovic right now is currently waiting for Barcelona. In fact, he has a very lucrative offer from Besiktas, which he has put on hold, because he first wants to find out what is going on with Barcelona, and whether Barcelona will be willing to sign him. Now, the second option for Ferran Torres, and this one was a surprise to me, and I'll tell you why it's a surprise. but it's no other than Fisnik Aslani, the 23-year-old center forward currently at Hoffenheim. Someone who has been dubbed the new Lewandowski because he has a very similar profile and similar style of play to the Polish center forward. And someone, and I say surprise, and you might say, why surprise, Mo? Fisnik Aslani's been on Barcelona's list for a while. In fact, I've talked about him in the channel a lot. It's surprising because Dortmund had decided to pay the release clause of Fisnik Aslani worth around 30 million euros. The player was in advanced negotiations with Dortmund, and it seemed like he was going to Dortmund, and that's it. He was going to be a Dortmund player. But as soon as Fisnik Aslani found out that Ferran Torres could be leaving the club and that Barcelona would need another center forward, Fisnik Aslani picked up the phone and told his agent, "Hold on, sir. Hold your horses. Do not complete my transfer to Dortmund yet." Now, Fisnik Aslani has not rejected Dortmund. He simply has paused the negotiations because he wants to see whether Barcelona go try to sign him. Now, Fisnik Aslani has said a million times throughout interviews that it's his dream to join Barcelona. He's constantly talked about it. He's constantly posted pictures on his Instagram page of him as a kid with a Barcelona jersey. So he wants to come to Barcelona. Since Barcelona were not going to make a move for him, he had decided to go to Dortmund. But now that Ferran could be leaving, Fisnik has put all of that on pause and waiting to see what Barcelona will do. Now, who's going to decide whether it's going to be Vlahovic or Fisnik Aslani in the place of Ferran? It's going to be Hansi Flick. The club will revert to Hansi Flick to decide which one of these two he will want on his squad. Now, Vlahovic, of course, bigger name, more experience, someone that will be coming for free, so it wouldn't cost Barcelona a single dime. Aslani, not as much as experience, younger, would cost 30 million euros, but of course, with a much higher ceiling. And my question to you is, if you were Flick, who would you choose? Dusan Vlahovic or Fisnik Aslani? I personally like Aslani, but let me know what you guys think down below. And also let me know, Luqueba or Cuti Romero. I personally like Luqueba better. And then finally, let me know about Jorge Salinas. Should Barcelona wait? Should Barcelona move on in their search? And with that, it is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go to bed. It is past midnight here, and tomorrow I do have to work. And then, of course, tomorrow is Monday. So tomorrow is podcast day, which means my favorite day. Podcast day is always my favorite day because I get to interact with you, my Barca News family. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, Visca Barça.